Action Research Multimedia Presentation by Anna Lemon. My problem statement. Statement of core values. I believe that my research would benefit from a qualitative search approach in which I will base student knowledge on their individual needs. I believe that it is important to celebrate differences as a way to minimize exclusion based on differences, as well as to promote a society of young people who display characters of care, respect, and empathy for those around them. Having students display their knowledge and learning in ways that are individual to themselves will help them to engage more deeply in academic tasks. I believe that if these values were taught and normalized throughout the education process, individual lives of exceptional learners or disabled students, as well as society as a whole, would improve. In my practicums and in other classroom experience, I have noticed that each school utilizes the special education classroom differently. Originally, I was surprised that the school board had not outlined a use for the special education room, but as I became more involved in the school community, it made sense that it would be used in a way that was most useful to the community that it was in. Some of the schools that I was placed in used the resource room as a quiet workspace for students who had identifiable learning needs and was open primarily for those students. In other schools, however, the resource room was open to all students, regardless of their learning needs. When the resource room was open to all students, it became a fun space where students wanted to be. However, when the resource room was designated for a selection of students who needed academic help, it was a place of embarrassment or shame to some students. These themes transferred into the classroom and on the playground in a variety of ways. In classrooms where students with identifiable learning exceptionalities were publicly sent to a different learning space, the students who worked in a resource room banded together away from their grade level classes, and there were missed opportunities for friendships and learning within the classroom. Alternatively, however, when students' learning environment was not dictated by their learning exceptionalities, the quality of a classroom improved as classroom aids were available to all students whether they had an identifiable learning exceptionality or not. Seeing the benefits of an inclusive classroom has led me to these research questions. Knowing that an inclusive classroom improves the academic learning of students within a classroom, what tools and resources would a teacher need in order to effectively facilitate an inclusive classroom? Why are students benefiting from inclusive classrooms, and why aren't all classrooms adopting this policy of learning? Would it be possible to apply the methods used in an inclusive classroom to an age-based classroom and expect an improvement from the non-exceptional learners? Should all teachers be using the strategies used to include exceptional learners regardless of their classroom demographic? Here is the list of the literature summarized in the following slides. In a case study of a highly effective inclusive elementary school, it shows the result of a study that was done measuring student achievement in an inclusive school setting. The people conducting the study chose one school as a sample. The article outlines how this school was chosen and why. The study's results show that within the inclusive schools and classrooms, the needs of all students were met, meaning that the majority of the teacher's energies were not focused only on students with exceptionalities within his or her classroom. It also showed students providing the teacher with classroom help, even giving aid to their classmates when possible. Prior to becoming a school that focused on inclusion of exceptional learners, the school had noticed that classrooms were struggling because students had a range of skills and teachers had little resources to give to them. In response, they closed the special education classrooms, included the students within their age-appropriate classrooms, and redirected the teachers who had worked in the special education classroom to work in the general classrooms with the classroom teacher as needed. The article explains the tools that the schools use to increase student success since the switch. Students in the inclusive classrooms have been given more attention to individual skills, and the resources of the school have been used efficiently and effectively to promote student growth. In Making Inclusion Work in General Education Classrooms, the authors point to inclusion within the classroom as something that is beneficial to both exceptional learners and general learners. While they tend to increase the academic and social learning of exceptional learners, the inclusive classroom also encourages the core values of care, respect, recognition, and empathy. The authors outline a variety of other classroom models that encourage inclusion in the classroom while providing all students with the aid that they need. Among others, some of the strategies that the author outlines to increase student involvement within the classroom are one teach, one assist, parallel teaching, and team teaching. In these models, regular classroom teaching is supplemented with classroom aids. The authors admit that inclusive classrooms are hard to begin, but encourage teachers to look into it as an option as the benefits seem to outweigh the difficulties. The author of Confessions of a Special Educator is a special education teacher who has worked in the school system for over 30 years. She is opposed to individualized instruction, although a variety of other professional opinions concerning exceptional learners states that individualized instruction is more often helpful in promoting student achievement. She emphasizes the students within her article, saying that every student is a complete person and educators do not need to try to fix or mend some of them until they fit within a grade-level classroom. Instead, as a teacher, accept all students and modify or adapt the lessons to include every whole, complete learner that comes into the classroom. Although the author is speaking directly to inclusive classrooms, the individuality that she ascribes to exceptional learners could also be ascribed to non-exceptional learners, as all students have individual learning needs. In the article, Creating Inclusive Classrooms That Work, the authors discuss what an inclusive classroom can look like. It provides students, parents, and teachers with a goal to work towards collaboratively. Parents and teachers should work towards encouraging and focusing on student strengths rather than weaknesses. Sending students to special classrooms focuses on the weakness of a student, making them less likely to perform with confidence inside or outside of the classroom. This confidence could also be ascribed to non-exceptional learners, as confidence plays a factor in a student's comfort level and assurance within class time. The authors give a 5-step process that parents and teachers work through before they can expect a functioning inclusive classroom. Develop a shared vision, share resources, understand the concept of the least restrictive environment, write an inclusive individual education plan, and tackle challenges with optimism. The author also provides the readers with a variety of accommodation, modification, and supports that they might find useful when transforming their classrooms or to encourage success within their classrooms. In this article, the authors stress the importance of collaboration between teachers and parents in the education of exceptional learners. Although this article focuses on students with ASD, the ideas could easily be applied to any exceptional learning behaviors or disabilities, as well as non-exceptional learners. The authors discuss the importance of keeping parents informed about their child's learning. In many cases, when parents did not feel informed, they failed to support their child's education because they were not sure how. Parent involvement affects the students both at home and at school. In a study taken to study the relationship between parents and teachers at an elementary school, it was found that there is a disconnect between teacher-parent relationships when deciding what is best for a student. Teachers feel that there is a lack of conversation or support, and parents feel that they, as advocates of their children, are being left out of the academic conversation. The authors of the article also outline the limitations of the article by admitting that although the study is meant to reflect educators and parents from any school community, it is possible that parents and teachers with either bad or good experiences have responded to the study, and it did not necessarily reflect the most common experience. In the article, Inclusive Teaching as a Response to Education, the authors discuss student exceptionalities and disabilities as diversities. By emphasizing the diversity of humans in general, different races, religions, and opinions, the authors indicate that different learning styles should be expected in our societies. They state that all students should be given individualized instruction within their classrooms to some extent, and that regardless of a student's background, good classroom habits and instruction will benefit all students. These themes can be ascribed to both exceptional and non-exceptional learners, as all students have different backgrounds and needs that correlate with their learning needs. Here are a couple of terms that I will be using in my research. Inclusive classroom. An inclusive classroom is a general education classroom in which students with and without disabilities learn together. It is essentially the opposite of a special education classroom, where students with disabilities learn with only other students with disabilities. Learning exceptionalities. This refers to a student who requires special instruction or related services to take full advantage of or to respond to educational programs and opportunities because of physical, mental, emotional, social, or learning exceptionalities. The next section will go over my research plan. In my active research, I will draw from 3 data sources. I will use journal entries so that the teacher can monitor the success between certain student pairs or gauge how effectively a change in method of teaching is to students. I will use samples of student work in order to document and recognize any positive or negative changes in student work due to new teaching methods being used. I will use interviews to allow students, parents, etc. to speak openly and professionally about their thoughts or reflections concerning student transitions and changes within the classroom. I will use these 3 sources of data to increase the validity of my evidence. For example, if I read in a student journal that she enjoyed the teaching methods that were being used in class, but in an interview with Mom she mentioned that student was acting more aggressively or seemed more stressed than usual, and the student work samples showed a decrease in the academic success, I would have to say that the journal entry that the student submitted was not valid. Besides the students themselves, the resource teacher, principal, and parents of the students in the class will be aware of and involved in the research. Data will be collected at school through journal entries and student work, as well as through parent interviews and student interviews during the day or at scheduled times outside of regular school hours. This chart shows how often data will be collected and when. Journals will be maintained weekly by students in the classroom and will be collected at the end of each week. Students will be able to give their feedback on the teaching methods being used. Student work samples will be collected from all students in the class and grades will be documented in order to assert whether student experiences as a result of the study have been beneficial. Interviews will be scheduled as necessary by students within the class as well as parents and other school staff who may have concerns or advice. They will take place at scheduled times either during the school day or at other times outside of the school day if required. I will ensure that student journal and diary entries and anything that they have confided within their entries remains confidential by collecting them daily and filing them safely away. I will ensure that marks or data that I collect based on student work samples remains confidential by submitting findings under a pseudonym or hiding the name of the student involved in the study by ascribing them a number or letter in order to avoid making assumptions about the experiment based on the student in question. For example, when presenting to a principal or another person, I could say, before the study, student A showed that they struggled with literacy. However, now they are working at grade level in media literacy and reading. In conclusion, researching how incorporating strategies from an inclusive classroom would benefit all learners regardless of exceptionalities will support my knowledge of teaching by improving my ability to plan lessons that include a larger variety of learners and learning styles. This is a list of the references that I've used so far in my study. Thank you for listening.